Welcome to the Unlist, House Edition, again. My previous video was filmed here, and this one is also going to be filmed here, because this is one of the few places I can actually do a video now. And today, I'm doing a bit of a deep cut on my personal favorite fragrance of all time. I've talked about this fragrance at length in other videos. I've done live streams in the past, but never really given it its own video, dedicated video. So here I am doing that. The fragrance, of course, is none other than Avon Black Suede, released in 1980 by Avon, and it remained in continuous production until probably the early 90s, where it was discontinued for a number of years, and then was brought back in the late 90s, somewhere between 1998 and 1999, where it received what I call the Mark II formula, which is when they moved from the in-house compounding laboratory development over to outsourcing. It's a bit of Avon history that Avon had their own labs and their own manufacturing. Okay, they ordered their own essences from, I'm sure, oil houses and other suppliers, but they had their own perfumers, their own compounding. So they operated the same way Chanel does, effectively, and the way LVMH does, where they did everything in-house. They didn't use perfumers or labs from IFF, Givaudan, Varanis, Simrise, people like that, MAN or CPL Laboratories, Takasago, Quest. They weren't part of the Avon plan for perfumes. Avon was all homegrown from the late 1800s up until about the mid 1980s. Now they did absorb a German-led perfume company that was based out of New York, Getting and Company, and Getting and Company was kind of the secret weapon for Avon. That's a deep history, a little off topic for Avon Black Suede, but Getting and Company was the genesis of their in-house perfume development because Adolf Getting, he was kind of the house perfumer, if you will, for Avon, because Dave McConnell wanted to focus more on the business side of it to grow the business rather than make the perfumes himself, since he was more of an amateur. He did mostly solo floors in the beginning when he was going door to door himself, designing his own stuff and then peddling it, getting women to sell for him in often cases. So Getting and Company perfume ultimately was rolled into Avon products by the 30s. They had their own perfumes. They sold under their name. And then they did stuff for Avon, or California Perfume Company, rather. They did stuff for California Perfume Company and for themselves. But by the 30s, when it all incorporated, California Perfume Company owned enough of Getting and Company, so they just kind of bought the rest and rolled it all into Avon products, and it just became Avon's internal development. And there it stayed from the 30s until the 80s. So the Mark II formula of Black Suede, this is where this knowledge is important. The Mark II formula of Black Suede is when Avon finally just stopped producing all their formulas based on their materials that they were sourcing and switched everything over to IFF. And they've also used Varanis, and they've also used Givaudan and all the major players after that point. But at first, the switch was IFF, and then they began to just give briefs to other oil houses the same way, any designer perfumer would, the same way that any client of these big oil houses does. Now, there are differences between Mark I and Mark II, and I'm going to show you that. And any version of Black Suede still being made today, which you can still buy Black Suede in the South American market and the North American market. So this includes all of South America, Brazil, and et cetera, all the way up through North America, including Mexico, United States, and Canada. Those Black Suede bottles are reformulations, but they are still Mark II. Okay, they haven't recomposed Black Suede since the late 90s. They just reformulated it as need be to meet IFRA or other requirements. United States didn't really follow IFRA, so a lot of the bottles made mostly in Mexico that were sold in the United States and Canada from probably the mid 2000s on, those are not necessarily IFRA compliant. Okay, guys, don't think that they neutered black suede. They just made whatever changes were for material availability. But uh, Avon has been a company that's been able to dodge IFRA in many markets because IFRA doesn't exist really as a uh, as like a legal division, right? Yeah, they are a council of perfumers. They are sort of a self-policing agency, but Europe has their own cosmetics commission, the SCCS, and the United States has the FDA, and IFRA is kind of the go-between for both those agencies. But America, until recently, until like this year, America had very lax laws on perfume regulation. So IFRA could suggest this, that, and the other, but Avon didn't necessarily have to follow it, right? So now they do, though, obviously, because with new laws passed, perfumes in America are going to be regulated much the same way they are in Europe, but at least up until this year, right? Anyway, that's a tangent. Let's get back on task. My favorite fragrance of all time, I've worn the most. Let me show you why. I will begin with the Mark I bottles. So let me go grab that real quick. They are going to be up here in the lounge somewhere. Okay, let's see if I can actually find the Mark I. Mark I might actually be in the cabinet. Yeah, I might have to go get that from the cabinet. So I'll just grab the Mark II real fast because I have that handy right here. Okay, let me, that might still be in my, okay, yeah. I've got Mark II right here. Here's Mark II. Let me go get Mark I real fast. I've got to go over here off camera and grab it. All right, people. I've got it. I've got Mark I and Mark II for you. Sorry it took me a little bit to do that, but like I said, some of these things are like stored away. I'm also going to grab the Mark I spray bottle while I'm up here. Let's go ahead and do that. Where is that Mark I spray bottle? It's got to be here someplace. Aha. Success. Okay, guys. So, two big differences between Mark I and Mark II that you will notice. When Black Suede first came out in 1980, its debut fragrance, it came in this bottle. Some folks who I talk to that are fans of this fragrance as well call this the small S bottle. It actually reminds me of an older version of the logo Safeway used to use. If you know the grocery store chain Safeway, they would use like a logo like this. There was a square, then it became rounder. Now it's the thing they use. But these bottles are splash bottles. This comes off, and then you still have a cap to unscrew. So just be aware of that if you buy these. Okay. And, you know, it smells like it's going to smell. And then that goes... It's been annoying to kind of have to take this off and then unscrew that to splash it. I admit that's a bit cumbersome, which is also why, very much also why, by the mid-'80s, they introduced a spray bottle in this form factor. So the thing is, another Avon history tidbit for you is a lot of Avon fragrances, the spray bottles were different from the other bottles because they didn't really have a standardized way of doing sprays. And they didn't want to put sprayers in all of their weird, unique bottles that Avon like to put all their perfumes in. So a lot of times, if a fragrance was to get a spray at all, then the spray bottle would be completely different from the normal presentation. And since typically only women's fragrances got the spray bottle, when they did a spray bottle for a man, very rare, but when they did one, they used a very boring, basic, standardized kind of bottle. Even though they didn't have a standard per se, they grabbed like the cheapest off-the-shelf bottle they could and filled it full of the stuff threw a sticker on it. So while the original splash presentation of the first version of Black Suede, right, this version, has a very high quality, nice looking presentation. The bottle looks nice, feels nice. The cap is plastic, granted, but it's a nice heavy plastic, textured, feels good. Feels like a typical designer fragrance would feel, beyond the separated cap and cover or whatever. But then when they would go do a spray bottle, they would give you this very thin glass, feels very fragile, very cheap, squishy plastic cap with like a sprayer that reminds you of the kind of sprayer you'd find on like a Bactine or like a bug spray or like a small bottle of Windex or like a Banaka if you use that. So like a very industrial commercial kind of sprayer, which gives out a lot of juice, mind you. Be aware if you buy one of these, and not just Black Suede, but if you buy any Avon men's fragrance that came in what I call the pill bottle like this, if it comes in this pill bottle and it has this sprayer on it, it's got a big honking, be careful, it's whoosh, big old spray comes out of these. But Black Suede was one of the rare fragrances that on the men's side of things that got a sprayer. So, and it got this treatment. And I have a lot of these bottles because starting from the mid 80s up until about the mid 2000s when they finally stopped this, any man's fragrance, right? Any man's fragrance that had a splash first, if it got a spray later, it went to this. If it was a more modern release from like the 90s or early 2000s and the original presentation was a spray, if it launched as a spray, didn't get this bottle. But if it launched as a splash and it moved to a spray later, it got this very generic, very cheap, what I call pill bottle with the sticker on it. And it's almost like what little standardization Avon had. Like I said, they didn't really have any standardization. What little bit they had resulted in something like this. Juice inside is still good, still the same juice. It's just, if you want the spray, you get this. So honestly, I like this better. Now Mark II changed that. Mark II made the cap an actual cap because the sprayer is right there now. You'll also notice between these, right, you will notice that they reused the cap, but they changed to script. So Mark II bottles have what I call the script cap, where it just says Black Suede on the cap like that. This one's a bit worn because I've used this bottle a lot. Now, let's talk about the smell. What makes Mark I and Mark II different enough that I have to separate them for you guys? Well, first things first. The original Mark I formula, as advertised on the back of the box, I still have the box for this one, it says there's nothing like the confidence of Black Suede. A clean, lean, straightforward scent. So you see that right there. I'm reading it right from the box. Camera's not going to focus on that, unfortunately, but that's what it says. There's nothing like the confidence of Black Suede. A clean, lean, straightforward scent. So bear in mind, that's what they were going for. So, it is, in essence, what it advertises itself to be. It is a clean, lean, straightforward, masculine scent. It is effectively an aldehyde leather chypre. So, if you enjoy Aramis, if you enjoy Avon's past aldehyde leathers in similar stripe, like Avon leather from '66, like Clint, Avon Clint from '76. If you like stuff such as another one off the top of my head would be English leather, which is older, Nietzsche 10, which is older. But if you like a muskier style of that kind of aldehyde leather, so think Lagerfeld from '78, Lagerfeld cologne. If you like Lagerfeld cologne, but you want it not as animalic, you want it cleaner, you want it more barbershop, you want it a bit more stripped down, not as heavy on the spices, then yeah, this is good. This is what you want. It has an aldehyde opening. It has orange in it instead of lemon. It's got a smooth, clean spice layout in the center. So nutmeg, your typical players like that. And then it moves into a pyrrolone base that is filled out with amber. Okay, Avon's patent, smooth, very labdanum heavy amber, not a animalic amber, not a very woody, spicy amber, a very smooth amber, and then some clean musks to round it out. So if you want a leather fragrance that is very barbershop, very wet shaver friendly, you want this. This is what you want. And it's good. So, I'm not sure what happened with Mark II, but once Avon discontinued the original formula in the early 90s, so like this particular bottle I have here, it's one of the last of the Mark I, and it's got, there's no date on the bottle, but I'm pretty sure it said 89 or something on it, so it's right near the end, a couple years away from the end. When it got reintroduced in 98, 99, and those bottles do have a year on them. This one I think says 99 on it. I'm pretty sure it does. These tiny stickers are very hard to read, especially with my really bad eyes. But, yep, okay, 98. So, 1998. When this came out, this was done by IFF. And they, like, made a more vivacious formula. They must have not had some of the materials that Avon was using from Mark I, so they had to reconstruct with what they had available. But ultimately, you walked away with a more macho, more potent, more complex fragrance. Honestly, it's better. Honestly, they say what you will about IFF, but they have better materials and probably better perfumers than Avon had, you know? And as much as I love my old Avons from the 60s and the 50s and the 70s, I love my really old Avons, I will say that their perfumers were probably not as bleeding edge. Their perfumers were not playing with all the cool toys. Their perfumers didn't have all the cool aroma chemicals at their disposal, or probably as much training either. They were in a walled garden, like Apple, right? They were in a walled garden with only their own resources to play with. So they had a very limited slice, a very limited view on what they could do. So you unleash the Kraken, that is IFF, and their perfumers. Wouldn't have been Bernard Chant by that point, or Josephine Catapano, they both retired. But other guys who worked at IFF, who had similar knowledge of the materials, they are now bearing down the full might of IFF perfumer expertise and quality materials to basically give Black Suede a steroid injection. Just give it some, brother, gonna pity the fool, right? That whole thing, you know? So, Mark II is not a powerhouse. Bear in mind, not a powerhouse, not an animal bomb. It's not one-man show. It's not Furio, okay? It's not something like Balenciaga Pour Homme, okay? It's not going to hit you like that. It's not Lanvin for men. It's not going to hit you with the big civet. So don't get that in your head. But Mark II definitely has more aldehydes, more spices, and there's a slight gender-bendy twist. I don't know what they decided or why to do this, but there is definitely a bit of makeup in here. So I feel like there is the heliotropin in here. There is the iris, orris, ionone melange in here. Okay, they got that mixed in, and of course they got it mixed in. And there's the oak moss, there's the pyrrolone, there's the amber. It still reminds of the Avon amber, but it's very different from Mark I. Okay, so this is a much more leathery, much more ambery scent. It is definitely more oomphy, but at the same time, that little gender bend twist. So it's like Tim Curry from Rocky Horror Picture Show. He's got the fishnets on. He's got the wig and the makeup. Okay, he's teased up. He's still muscly and manly, but he's in full drag head to toe. Now, most people don't perceive this fragrance this way. Obviously, I have special reasons for doing that, since I have experience with that side of things. So those of you guys who are like completely straight and don't have any concept of leather bars or any of that sort of thing, that's fine. You can wear this. You won't smell gay. I mean, I'm not someone to condone bigotry anyway or homophobia, but I know some of y'all out there are really, really insecure about that sort of thing. And I'm just telling you, this is safe to wear. I'm just saying it's a bit more betwixt than Mark 1, right? Version 1. I mean, Dior Homme from 2005 is way more gender bendy than this. So if you're someone who's comfortable wearing Dior Homme with the big slap of iris in the face, if you're okay with that, if you like Tom Ford, Noir de Parfum, if you're safe wearing those things, this is not even as severe as those. Not even as gender bendy as those, but it is certainly more, the needle pushes more towards the center with this one than with the Mark 1 formula. However, like I said, more leathery, more aldehyde, stronger. Mark 1 is just a bit cleaner, a bit more barbershop. And, you know, if you own both and you wear both, you will notice that at the end of the day, late in the dry down, I'm talking hours into the dry down, like we're talking, it's been on your skin for 6 hours, you don't really notice the difference. You can't really tell. I grew up wearing this version, right? Mark II. Those are the bottles that I got in the late 90s, right, when I was still a teenager. I didn't know there was a big difference between this and the old one. So I was very surprised. I was very, very clearly surprised when I went all the way back and got the 1980 bottle and I smelled it and I'm like, huh, it's much cleaner. Yeah, it's much cleaner. The aldehydes are thinner. The leather note is more laid bare. The amber is also more toned down. The spices are not as strong. This is a sharper, okay, sharper, more English leather style. It's not quite as sharp or acrid as that. There's no sterolol acetate in this. The sterolol acetate in the English leather gives it that really sharp feeling like you get in old bottles of Magriff and stuff like that, right? It's not going to be sharp like that. But it's still much more strident. This is a more strident, more, like I said, wet shavery, kind of aftershave-y kind of smell. But that tracks with what Avon was doing in the market at that time, 1980. That strident kind of wet shaver feeling tracks with what Avon was doing. And that's how the original black suede was. So what IFF did with Mark II, basically, is they just sexed it up. They took black suede, it took the original formula, and they built on top of it, and they sexed it up. And when they did that, it made, in my opinion, a slightly better fragrance. They are about 75 to 80% the same. Okay? They are definitely more similar than different, but there's a big enough difference that those of you nerds who go down the vintage rabbit hole and you do your batches and that whole thing, you will want to smell both. You will not be happy unless you smell both. So I am telling you how to identify. And that's it. That's my video on my favorite fragrance of all time. I don't know who the perfumer is, neither for Avon or the later build that came out in the 90s. Can't tell you. That information is just gone with the wind. So if anyone knows who the perfumer of black suede was, either version of it, please let me know. I'd be honored to finally have that knowledge in hand so I can credit the perfumer appropriately. Otherwise, it just remains a mystery for the ages. But you can wear this stuff any time of day. Yes, it's leather. Yes, it's amber. But I've worn it in 75-degree heat. I've worn it in 30-degree cold. And honestly, it's one of the few fragrances of its type that just seems to work in all conditions. Mark 1's a little better for summer than Mark 2, granted. But they both work. Okay, guys, this has been The Unlist. Thanks for watching.